Hashcast with your panelists Pedro's Grow and Superior Buds, and it's me Fregrowli. We're live every Friday night on all your favorite platforms, including YouTube, Twitch, and X. Watch all of our previous episodes on those platforms, including Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, and more. Tonight, we'd like to welcome our guest, Mark Richardson, aka Bubble Man, a pioneer in the cannabis industry and one of the world's leading experts on cannabis extraction. Dating all the way back to 1993, Marcus has been a leader in cannabis research and activism. He was awarded a hemp license in Manitoba, Canada, the first legal one in nearly 75 years. In 99, he created Fresh Headies, and with the introduction of Bubble Man name, he created and popularized the first multitasking filtration kit, aka bubble bags. Since 2014, he has been researching and developing the effects of different cannabis strains on various medical conditions through his company in Jamaica, and in the last 6 years has expanded his full melt hash brand to multiple countries across the globe. On top of all those incredible achievements in the cannabis space and more, Bubbleman has served our community for over 14 years with his epic podcast, Hash Church, his Wake and Bake series, and a nearly endless supply of content on YouTube, Instagram, and more. He's a true visionary in the cannabis industry and for 3 decades has helped shape the future of this ever-expanding market. Welcome, Bubbleman. Thank you for joining us. It's an honor, a blessing, and a pleasure to have you today. And please let everyone know, if they don't already, where can we find you?
Well, thanks, guys. Thanks for that really nice introduction. I never get introductions like that. That was like,
hopefully it's all right. I swear I didn't have ChatGPT help me on it. Or...
No, it was pretty damn good. You know, we did get one of the first licenses in Canada, in Manitoba in particular, in over 73 years. So you had that pretty accurate. And Fresh Headies certainly was started in 99. And I've been doing it since around 1990, 91. So just this whole thing of hemp activism and Cannabis Compassion Club philanthropy and flipping pounds, you know, doing the whole black market thing back in the day, and how that, you know, it was really flipping pounds that led into Fresh Headies. So it was like I flipped pounds, and then all of a sudden Fresh Headies, like the bubble bags. I don't know how many people know this, but like a 5-gallon, the original like 4 or 5 bag kit, it is almost the exact same dimensions as a half-pound bag. So I went from just like packing half-pound bags into hockey bags to packing half-pound size bubble bag kits into, you know, envelopes. So what a trip. Thanks for having me here, guys. I appreciate it.
It just so happened those sizes happen to be the same, right?
It was a complete coincidence.
Wonderful to have you on again, my friend. Obviously, a huge inspiration for me and what I do over here and whatnot. And speaking of the 99, I don't know how close I was to the first, but I had my first set of bubble bags that I believe we had spoke before that your wife had hand sewn back in 99. So I was one of the purchasers of the first set of bubble bags, hopefully ever.
Yeah, that would have been, you know, she only sold them for so long before we ended up getting in touch with Mark Rose, who was originally making the isolator bags for Mila. He was really part of that invention. He named the bags Isolator. He manufactured them and created the bags. It was Eldon, a hash smuggler friend of ours who's since passed away, who was on the couch looking at the Reinhardt Delps ice cold extractor machine in Mila's apartment when he said, you know, 2 5-gallon bag with screen bottoms in a 5-gallon bucket, and you got the same thing. You know, between him and Mark, they created the isolator bags. Mila sold those bags, and that led right into the bubble bags. So what a trip. Is it time to heat bangers and get
Pedro has to mute his mic while he torches out the entire studio over there. But one of the things you had brought up pre-show, and one of the things I haven't actually gotten any feedback, experience, read any reviews on or anything, and quite frankly, one of my go-tos is the Puffco Peak Pro because it is so handy. Now, I talk them up a lot. I know there's a lot of different battery operated, you know, rigs out there that fit in a cup holder, but those are 2 of my favorite things about it. One of my least favorite things about it is the fact that I can't really get a man-sized hit out of it. You know what I mean? Like a real a torch, an e-nail, like a real fat dab.
A dab.
Yeah, a real dab, you know. But you had mentioned pre-show that there's new 3XLs or whatever they're called, the bigger the atomizers, they actually give that.
Yeah, so first I'll go back to saying, listen, I have every single unit you could possibly buy. Every company has sent me. This is like a 10-foot, shelf with like iSpire and Focus and Puffco and Dr. Dabber, and like I'm telling you, like every unit that's on the market is sitting on that shelf over there. Lots of them unopened, in fact.
I feel you.
The first one I got was this Puffco, and I think this is a Pro, but just the kind of, it's got the travel kit. I thought that was really cool. I had just a funny first experience with Roger, the owner of the company. We kind of got off on the wrong foot, and then Chelsea, felt bad, and we made our amends, but she ended up giving me, she's just been super, super generous. So I got to shout them out. But at the same time, so I got this one first. Literally at the same time, I got my Legends of Hash Carta 2. And people would always ask me, which one do you like best? Which one do you like best? And I felt, like, listen, I'm not getting paid by these companies. They can give me things all they want. I know they're giving it to me for the traction of the audience. They're not asking me to say anything, which I love. And I was honest. I was like, you know what? The Carta, it hits harder than this one. And so I've been saying that for the last probably 6 months. And then Chelsea sends me this one. This is a new Puffco Pro, originally with the regular size bowl, and then just recently with this 3D XL chamber, which is extremely deep. I mean, the thing is deep. It's twice as deep as the regular bowl. And I thought, okay, well, shit, here we go. This thing looks like beefcake. First time I put a dab in it, I put in a fairly large dab. And I have to say, like, right now, this is the biggest rip that I can get out of a unit that has a battery.
Like a portable unit.
And so I'm just hitting this one all the time. She did also send me the little bag. I don't think I have it here. Oh, actually, I do. And because I saw this little bag, and at first I thought it was really cool that it had the little sort of joint pouch on the side, which opens up like this.
Oh yeah.
So you can kind of roll in front of you while it's around your neck or whatever. I don't roll joints, but I did like the way it looked. And I thought maybe I can put my dabs here, and then it was like she told me that you could fit the Puffco, the whole right in the top, so I can literally like drop this right into the bag and it zips right up. And then more importantly, the whole bottom, which I'll just throw these in now to sort of give you the size. You can fit about 9 jars in the bottom.
Oh, nice.
So I've got I've got my sabers from Focus.
Heck yeah.
There we go.
I'm gonna do this probably a few times throughout the show here, but I'm gonna share a post from you on Instagram from 14 weeks ago, basically saying the same exact thing. Why can't we all be friends? Let's just get along, guys. Look at that. Pretty much those 2 same rigs you just showed us, and yeah, I mean, I love a battery
green one.
rig.
Well, that's kind of where we're getting now with these electronic heating devices. What should we call them? Electronic flameless heating devices. We're going to start getting into a market where they're starting to box a little bit, starting to try to beat each other up for their slice in the market. And,
well, what they're doing for us is they're exposing an enormous amount of people and opening up the amount of people who are coming into, because let's just be honest. Who the fuck is going to pay $750 for this banger, and then however much for this pipe, and then get the torch and make sure you have the butane, and oh yeah, you got your dunk tank, and make sure you got your marble set, and let's make sure you got your dab rag. And
I can think of at least 3 people on the show.
But it's a small group, believe it or not. We are infinitesimal. So what I love to see is I want to see people in the world enjoying what we're enjoying. That will never do this. They're never going to do this. Like,
sure,
this is not happening. But this is like Art Deco. It's like something out of a modern museum or whatever. It's like, oh, I'll take
somebody can walk into your house and not even know what that is on the counter, right? On the shelf.
I'm amazed at how many people are willing to hit it. What's that?
I said they're app enabled. They light up. I mean, yeah, it is a piece of art. It's a lot of fun now. Do they
look less ferocious? Does a dab rig look too intimidating?
Yeah,
the torch and everything.
It's a little bit feminine.
Yeah, sure. I see that.
Yeah, colors are a little more toned down. They're RGB enabled.
Hey,
That
as long as
smells
I can get a
unnecessary.
man-sized dab out of a feminine device, we'll be okay, guys.
Yeah,
Exactly. Well, and
I've got the
Go
Carta
ahead.
sitting here. I've got the different peaks and stuff sitting here, and that was the biggest problem that I had. I jumped out of that game when I just got frustrated because it couldn't give me that. I guess we're now quoting it as a man-sized dab. It always spilled over the edge. I was always taking my atomizer apart and trying to clean the dish out because it just spilled all over, and it was just a pain in my. Was it kind of convenient? Sure, if you hit it right and if you did the right things, but
exactly.
now that you say
If
that
you
they've
filled
got
it
the
too
bigger,
much,
yeah, you're screwed. You're
then
screwed.
it's splashing and it's getting sucked into the holes that bring your oxygen in, and it's not.
Yeah.
It was never built for that. And this one, even like even more different, at which they say all the time, this one they built for sipping, not ripping. And I gotta say, like when I'm at like my kids, soccer game or something, and I'm just like,
Okay.
debonair. It's different, it's the difference, I guess, between getting stoned and getting high.
Well, and I think those
No.
the different e-rigs, the different atomizers that they have, and also the different, the different dab rigs, along with all the different bangers and whatnot that we have, they're all different. They all hit a little different. They're all made obviously a little different, but they're a different experience. And if you already know what kind of a dabber you are, a lot of us more experienced guys can give you the dab that you want with the equipment and stuff that we have available, Pedro's a tiny bit louder. I'm sorry, I'm fucking loud as shit. Turn me down, Budsy. What do we so
Ooh,
let's go
anything
into
pays.
let's go into some questions. I guess let's go into your first of all, let's just get this out of the way. Your preferred flower concentrate.
I haven't smoked flower in about 24 years.
Nice.
I will vaporize flower, which really is just vaporizing hash.
Right, agreed.
But I do love concentrates. That being said, my favorite all-time hit of all time, the greatest hit I've ever
wow,
made.
that's heavy.
I had Brian Ratcliffe. He used to go by Cool Liquid or Rat Dog. He was a glass blower that blew with Slinger and Hippo here in Vancouver. He's in Colorado now. He's the guy that does the huge bangers that are like cups, and he puts the ice cream in them. And
Oh, yeah,
have you
yeah,
seen
yeah.
this? You got to
Oh, yeah.
see this shit. This is like, so Brian is just a fucking great dude. For those of you that have seen him, support him, like his post, comment on his post, buy his shit. He's literally an awesome guy. He was in our Degenerate Art Show back in 2003 that Slinger and I threw in Vancouver at my Melting Point Gallery. But he basically built a pipe for me, and I asked him to build this pipe, and it was two clear kind of small bongs, and they were melted together, and they only came really together right at the mouthpiece. At the mouthpiece, the two bongs joined, but at the bottom, they were their own water, they were their own bowls. One of the bowl was a stainless steel screen that I would flame some beeline over some full melt Rene bubble hash. True 73 before the 90 micron bag, so 73 all the way to 120. In the other bowl, I had the hot glass vaporizer, which now VripTech Mark sells it. It's the wand that's basically like a soldering iron with a double encased glass tube. Brian also created that with his brother, who's Ewoks Glass. So they created this back like 20 plus years ago. This fucking vaporizer, bro, it crushed everything. You put it over this big bowl, you put your flour, your hash, whatever in there, and the taste was like second to none. It was like up there with the greatest vaporizer hit I ever had. But this pipe was both. You took the full melt hit and the vapor hit of the same herb of the hash that you were hitting. So I was vaporizing Rene flour while smashing Rene full melt. And they were like, they're separate in their own tubes, and they're spinning right up until they get to your lips. And I shit you not, as you hit it, you can taste the two things, like, oh, here's some vapor from the weed over here, and here's and then as it's going into your throat, it's like amalgamating and joining together and giving you, I mean, it was the greatest hit of all hits. So that's all I'll say about that. So
wow,
that's pretty wild.
Yeah, that's a pretty intense fucking statement there.
You hear that, glass blowers? Get to work.
I'm telling you, dude. I'm telling you.
And then,
keep
and
it.
then proceeding just a little bit deeper. I guess the first question would then be, and this might be a heavy one, but do you have a hydrocarbon versus a solventless preference?
Well, I haven't really ever smoked hydrocarbons. The only person that ever convinced me to smoke hydrocarbons was Giddy Up when he was in Jamaica on one of our Jamaican experiences. He's like, "You got to try my resin, dude. You got to try my resin." And everyone was like, "Come on, Bubble Man, just try his resin." I was like, "I don't want to smoke hydrocarbons or whatever, but okay, you know, I don't want to be like a bummer." And so I smoked this dab of oil. And I hate to say this like I'm being some biased prick or whatever, but dude, I got such a fucking headache from that
Oh,
oil.
shit.
Like yeah, dude, it was crazy. I got a bad headache, and I don't know if it's because I'm like super purist, right? Like if you just feed your kid like hot dogs and Twinkies, they'll live forever. If you feed them like a vegan diet for like 10 years straight and then give them like a bag of chips, they'll die. Like the BHT will just kill them. They won't be able to survive. So it's like I've softened myself up.
Not preserved.
Yeah, because I know that there's no reason for that oil to have given, except maybe he didn't purge it enough. I don't know. Maybe
there's plenty of reasons.
He was in a rush. I mean, he was known for being a BHO guy. Like, I don't think people were like, I don't know. I just knew that his sort of, you know, his story behind him was this guy knows what he's doing. But it did give me a headache. I'm not making it up. And
that's literally the one time you've had BHO.
Yeah, I made it once too.
When was that? Do you remember the year
that I tried, like smoked it?
Yeah, that you smoked the hydrocarbon that gave you the headache.
The year that I smoked it would have been like probably, oh fuck, you know, maybe like it's hard to tell. I would have had to have been involved with Tony there from Blue River.
So we're going back a minute though, if it's already that.
Yeah, so like 2012 or 2014, maybe 2014, because that's when Blue River started.
That was before.
I can't remember.
That was before things are done right. Yeah, before things are done right, that's for sure.
Dude, I'll tell you, that was, and here I am, just like, I was like 15 years into chain smoking full melt bubble every day.
Why change?
You know what I mean? Like, no Twinkies, no hot dogs, just like full melt fucking bubble, stained glass window, Renee and champagne and sweet skunk and all the, you know, the old cultivars that I used to talk about. They were so special. It was a special time to turn everyone on.
Bubble Man, I hope that one day I can share what I would consider just as high quality hash as the rest of them, from my garden to you and your lungs one day.
Not
maybe
before me though.
If I fair enough. You're in the States.
I'm the only
funny
one who's smoked both of y'all's stuff.
That's fair. That is
nice.
True.
So
there's a guy in my chat right now.
Superior buds. Well, whose is better? No, I'm just kidding.
Well,
say, Marcus.
Oh, I was just gonna say we got the BHO master in my chat room right now. I got like 76 people watching. He says it's the king of concentrate, and then Rackham's is like BH nope.
I saw that rack in here. Yep.
It's a never-ending fight.
It is. It really
but my
is.
question is why? Like, why not BHO? What's the difference for you? Than the
okay. The difference for me is because I was the solventless guy. You have to understand. I released this method. I mean, I didn't release it. I popularized this in a way that she was not going online and showing this. She was not. I did that. So I did that in 1999. Literally 1 month after I did that, Indra, John Davis, who released the BHO method, he's the guy that did, he fucking released this method. Like, I was just like, oh my God, dude, like, are you fucking kidding me? Now, keep in mind, the year before he released it, I was at my friend's house in Amsterdam, Steve Dumas, who goes by the Nose, big hash guy, awesome fucking dude. And I guess he was buddies with this guy, John. So this is my life, right? Everything's so coincidental. Well, I end up at Steve's apartment just after John leaves. And he's like, my buddy John was just here. And I was like, well, what was he doing? He was like, he took this metal body of a pen and he hollowed it out and he stuffed it full of weed. And then he took like a can of butane and blasted it through the weed. And he made this oil. And I was like, what the fuck? And so that was actually the first BHO I'd ever smoked. And I remember it was so fucking strong and so absolutely insane that I ended up giving the last half gram that I had of it, and I only bought a gram, to Mila as I was leaving Amsterdam. And this was like 96 or 97, right? Really early. So But Steve was friends with John. And so years later, I would learn John would release this method. Now, John had no idea that he would release this and it would catch on like wildfire. No pun intended. So because I was a solventless guy, every single person that ever set a fire or blew up or hurt themselves inevitably would write me a letter or an email or get in touch with me and be like, bro, because my concern, now John would be hitting me up and be like, oh my God, all these kids, they're doing all this stuff. You have to help me, Bubble Man. I'm like, okay, well, what can I do? He's like, well, you know, like, can you tell them that this is dangerous? And so I start telling people it's dangerous, and I'm just feeding them the information from the grandfather of BHO fucking being released. And they are freaking out. Bubble Man's a fucking hater. Fuck Bubble Man. He's just trying to. And John's like, you got to tell them about the mercaptans. They're accumulative in the nervous system. They never leave the body. They're oil soluble. He's going on. He's giving me all this information. I'm putting it onto the web, and people think I'm being a fucking hater. And I finally tell them, I'm like, bro, they're not listening to me. But the people who would listen were the ones that blew up. And the one kid years ago, he blew his hands off, both of them. And that was so fucking sad to me, bro, that I'd never seen anything be that bad in cannabis except the DEA. They were the worst things in cannabis before this fucking method got released. And now kids are blowing up. It's okay if you learned and you didn't blow up or it was a close call, but you have to understand that a lot of fucking kids, and when I say kids, I mean young people, they blew themselves up. And as a father, I try to tell my kids, look, whatever you do, just don't like burn your body or like tattoo your face. And you should be good. Just go out there and be in the world. Don't disfigure yourself. You know, I want to see what you look like forever until I'm gone. So that's my only, I'm not against people making it with degrees in labs with proper
C1, D1 environments and
exactly the sunken drains and the everything. Of course, I'm
closed
not
loop
that.
systems, not
but
open.
That's not what BHO was in our community. It
right.
was 99% the other thing, and so
for a long time too. And honestly, even in the commercial industry today and the regulated market here in Michigan, BHO has a bad rap, and it's not because of the dangers, which are a real thing, but that's more, you know, I would say more in the black market, caregiver, gray market, whatever you want to, legacy community, right? In the commercial market, it is a race to the bottom, and there has been no regard for terpene preservation. There has been no regard for strain perseverance or, you know, flavor or anything of that regard. And ultimately it's used as a method to, I think, en masse get to distillate just to make edibles. And so I think by and large, it's got a bad rap in the flavor market because of that. And it's got a bad rap in the, you know, the connoisseur market because of the dangers of it, if you will, then maybe the online community because of the dangers of it. But I still will fight tooth and nail and claim that it can, if done right, be just as good as any other hash on the market. Unfortunately, there's just very few people trying even to do it right.
And it's easier to just do it right with rosin and no worry of blowing up. No need to have, like, the minute the rosin method, you have to understand BHO, the other reason that it was so popular, and I'm not talking about people like yourself that are really mastering the craft and creating the nicest products.
Blast off.
Get it. Dude, I want to know what rig that is there.
And I want to know what he's dabbing.
Right.
Dustin Revere. I'm smoking Frankie's Incense Haze.
There we go.
But yes, what I was going to say was that there's just the reason it was so popular in the beginning, and I'll probably get some hate for this too. And I'll say it's the same thing with rosin, and it's not good. People would buy bubble bags. The odd person would buy them and run their material through it and just get full melt bubble and be like, oh my God, I'm a fucking bubble ambassador for the rest of my life. I'm converted. This is amazing. That was a small percentage of people. Most people would get returns where they would be like, hey, Bubble Man, my hash is like sandy and it won't stick together. Like, how do I get it to melt like yours? And I'm like, well, there's two options. You can spend the next 20 years deep diving on the symbiotic relationship of mycorrhizospheres and root systems, living soils and nematodes and fucking light frequencies and teas and guanos, or Or you can just take that subpar, mediocre shit weed, blast it with a can of fucking butane right here, and it'll come out gold, and it'll look amazing in the beginning. 99, 2000, 2001, you'll be the fucking man. And so they did. Now, don't get me wrong. This isn't hate towards butane, because it's the same thing with rosin. If you ask most people to show you the hash they made their rosin with, they don't want to show it to you, because it's not 6-star hash. It was like 4-star, 4.5. Maybe it was a 5-star, but they're still just like, it's like leaving this it doesn't quite melt as much as I want it to. When you have hash, dry sifted or wet wash, that melts like butane oil or rosin, there's really no need to take it any further. But most people, what I'm saying is BHO and rosin, it gives entry to a dabbable product to the masses. And bubble hash and dry sift gives dabbable products to the very fucking few. That's the difference. So I love rosin for that very reason. I love that less kids are blowing up, and less people who shouldn't be trying to do something they don't know how to do, they're not trying anymore.
Is it only getting to the very few because so few people are doing it? Because one of the things that drew me away from rosin, I have a rosin press. I actually bought a what is this, 2000, you guys will have to correct me, maybe 16, 17, when we were all buying hair straighteners from Target.
Yeah, it started in 14.
Okay.
14, 15.
15,
Yeah, it was March. It was March 2014 when Soil Grown came on Hash Church, episode 25. He had shared it on Instagram like maybe 9 or 10 days earlier, and people were like, "What the fuck?" Like, it was kind of like people were like telling me, "Dude, I think this thing's gonna blow up." So I was like, I contacted him, like, "You got to come on Hash Church. Show us what you're talking about." And it was neat because I was hanging out with Tony a lot at the time, and he would take Jibbs's hash and he'd put it in parchment, and he'd close the parchment, and he'd hit it with a hair straightener. And I was like, "Oh, that's cool." I think he liked to say that he kind of created that, but from what I know, it was Nicotee, because Nicotee was at a point where he was trying to explain to people that dabs were not BHO exclusively, because when dabs initially got named, the only fucking thing you could dab was BHO. So dabs equal BHO.
Yeah, for the most part, hash was a bowl topper because it was never full melt.
But come along Nicotee, and he wants to explain to people about the solventless quiver, right? He wants to explain to people, he coined that term solventless, even though it's a terrible misnomer, and water's the universal solvent.
Please expand.
And every hydrocarbon terpene that's present in the plant is also a
100%. Thank you. We got it on record.
But beyond that, we got to give it up to Nicotee, because he created this solventless thing, and then he figured out a way. Like, I was obsessed, as Sam was, keeping our hash in powder, because we were hitting it on stainless steel screens, and we were like, melting it into these big clear domes. He wanted his to be, flags, where he could just zip and lift it up. And so that was really like Nicotee really popularized and started that whole flag, full mouth, solventless dabs. Oh, what are dabs? It's like, well, dabs can be BHO, which is a chemical solvent extracted resin, or you can do full melt hash. Most people's hash does not dab like rosin, so most people turn their hash into rosin. I love it. It repopularized bubble bags and the whole water hash craze for a whole new reason, because bubble bags would have blown up at a level that no one could have conceived of. We all had the ability to grow amazing weed, but you only know what you know. You might think you have amazing weed, but if you've never been exposed to amazing weed, you don't know.
Hey, even if you're 24, 25 years in on this product, there is definitely still room for expansion, obviously, in this market. And I will, until the day I die, advocate for everyone to be able to grow this in a greenhouse, in their backyard, on their doorstep, wherever it might be. I think everyone absolutely needs to grow this. But you bring up a lot of great points about the progress and the kind of evolution of rosin and full melt, and really the differences. And I love the comment about the solventless being a misnomer, because we bring that up all the time. But one of the things that turned me away from rosin back in the 2014 era of the hair straighteners is the lack of efficiency. And I know we've come a long way, but the draw to me with BHO is quite frankly, the efficiency, the capacity, the turnaround capability, and the amount that you can run in at one time, right? And still at a craft level. That being said, I know you are doing things at your facility to kind of expand that. So maybe you can kind of tell us, where we've come from, this kind of hair straightener or a 3x2 plate, something like a business card where we're just squishing a couple nugs at a time, right? How are we getting efficient full melt hash
Yeah,
nowadays?
what variables have we changed?
Well, that's not so much the variables. You just scale, right? Like everything is a scale. So in order to scale rosin, first you have to scale water hash. So obviously water hash scaling's been happening at our company, Whistler Technologies, for like the last 5 years. There's a whole host of new companies, from Delta Separations to Low Temps Osprey to Hashtech to Hashatron. There's a ton of companies that have kind of come in. We were the first ones to really do it on the level of like, a 300-liter tank, and then, which is like 70 gallons or whatever. And then like 1,000-liter tank. Now we're getting into like 200 plus gallons, and then 2,000-liter tanks. Now we're getting into 200-gallon tanks, and or more, sorry, like more like 500. So people are often afraid to scale, and it wasn't until I met Skunkman Sam and started really like mentoring under him and getting under his wing and just listening to the things he said. That's when I realized, because I've been smoking full melt for quite some time, but when I smoked his shit, it seemed like it was like 4 or 5 times stronger. It was a very humbling experience, because at the time I used to knock people out with my hash. No one had ever smoked anything like it. But then here's this fucking anomaly just living in Amsterdam that I go to his apartment, and he smokes hash with me, dry sifted hash that he not only lived in the countries and collected those seeds, took them back to his greenhouse, started a legal pharmaceutical company in Amsterdam called Hortifarm, bred all of those genetics, planted hundreds of thousands of seeds to pick very small amounts of genetics to work with, bred like Durban Poison and Skunk Number One and all these, like, was neighbors with the Hayes brothers in California and in Santa Cruz. Those were his fucking neighbors, bro. And guess who was on the other side? Well, who else? Fuck, Frank Zappa. Like, who else would be your other neighbor when the Hayes brothers are on one side? So, this guy really humbled me out, and I'd be like, okay, you can't really grow like acres and get like full melt. And he was like, why not? Like, what do you mean? It's only this limited mindset that thinks, well, if I can make bubble in a 1 gallon, this is because of my we're all narcissistic. We all think that it's all so much about us that it's like, well, I've got the process down for a 5-gallon bucket. I don't think it's as efficient in a 20-gallon bucket. Like, bro, it can be as efficient and more efficient in a 2,000-gallon bucket. We just have to make sure that we pay attention to the variables and make sure however much water is there and the shape that it's in and the way the material fits and how to chill the water and how to make sure when it's mixing, or if you're creating the torus and pulling all the outside material back into the center so it's looping back through. All of these little things, engineers do this naturally. They go to school for this.
Right.
You don't even have to, you know what I mean? Like, the hash maker doesn't necessarily have to do too much thinking about that. You get a bunch of engineers to come up with some concepts, and then the hash maker uses the equipment and explains to the engineers, change this and this.
Yeah, it's the application, right? You've got people with the brains to know why things do what they do, but then we have people that are experts on the plant or the hash making process. Once they come together, they really can create something more
but that's
advanced
the magic,
and innovative.
the coming together. When people come together, they don't always do the semi-vesicous, which is like that third space right in the middle of the
diagram or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. That's where the magic happens. And if you can interact, I think that's why corporate and non-corporate cannabis people have had such a hard time, because there was no third layer between those two sides to sort of like buffer either side from one another. Because you've got the corporate people that kind of look down on the legacy cannabis people. Oh, these, they're drug addicts. Hey, let's go get a whiskey after work, right? So it's like that mentality. It's still there. I've seen it to this day. But then on the other side, you've got sort of stoner people that really,
don't understand business and
don't understand business that well. We're lucky enough to be. I talked to this a buddy of mine from Brooklyn today about what we were doing while we were selling cannabis. Whatever you want to tell yourself you were doing, what you were really doing was you were monetizing prohibition. And that comes with a karmic debt. And I swear to God, I used to know the most amazing, I mean, I still know them, but I back in the day, I knew the most kindest people, the most loving, kind-hearted, wonderful growers, compassionate. And it was just amazing, the shit that would happen to them. It's like one bad thing after another. And it took me years to realize that, well, that was our karmic debt of monetizing people in prison for doing the same thing that we were doing without getting caught, because that's what gave the value to cannabis back in the day. Like $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000 a pound is bonkers, fucking crazy. That's insane. That's based on like, you will go to jail if you get caught with this. It's
Sure.
like, well, I'm charging $5,000 a pound, you know.
Right.
And that was also the days of prohibition, which were how much can I get and how fast can I get it. And when you were talking earlier about terpene preservation, and I do urge us to call these profiles volatile organic compounds, because terpenes are really just one of the compounds. You know, they're one group, but there's terpenoids and esters and thiols and thiolates, and there's a whole other host, which I think there was an article recently. I can't remember the name of the
Go back and say
publication.
that one more time, just so people can. Like
VOCs? Is it
say that one more time.
volatile organic
We'd
compounds?
like to call them what? Sorry.
Yeah, the VOCs, the VOCs, exactly. VOCs, volatile organic compounds, or VOCs. Because we, you know, this whole terpene conversation started back in 2014, and I remember the day it started because I got a message from Kay. I don't know if you guys know Kenny from Trichome Technologies. Trichome Technologies, and OG, super OG, was on like 60 Minutes back in the day. Was just a really great guy. He hits me up one day and he's like, "Hey, I'm here with Sasha, and we're extracting terpenes in his lab, and you need to figure out how to get the water-soluble volatile organic compounds out of your water." He actually said terpenes. You need to get those terpenes out of that water and re-put them into the hash. And I was kind of like super busy at the time, peak of hash church, just doing all this other shit. So I was like, okay, I'm going to tell two smart people that I know about what Kay and Sasha, who ended up being Sasha fucking Shulgin, the chemist. That's who he's making terpenes with. He's fucking texting me this. I'm like, oh my God, dude, that's amazing. Got to meet him. He was a very interesting man. But basically, I told Tony.
Oh, go ahead.
This is about this is when the terpene conversation. I shouldn't say it's when it really started. When it really started was in 2000 in Skunkman Sam's apartment in Amsterdam, and he invited Ed Rosenthal, he invited Ethan Russo, he invited me, of course, Rob Clark, a host of other people that were sort of had an interest. And at the time, he had pure cannabinoids, like 5 or 6 or 7 of them. I remember being surprised that he could just get those in 2000. And then he had like a dozen or so terpenes, like myrcene and osamine and pinene and
beta-caryophyllene
or whatever. Yeah, he had beta-caryophyllene. That's the one the drug dogs are tested with. That's what he told me about that one.
Probably the most successful one then.
It's one in every strain. There's no cannabis strain without beta-caryophyllene like it's in all of them.
Oh, well, now you're going to make me go through all my terpene tests from the last 10 years and see if I've got one.
It's there. It's there.
New phenome hunt there.
So yeah, it's I told Tony about it and I told Horatio about it, and both of them had like terpenes within about a month or less, and that's when Blue River was started. So Sam started the conversation in 2000. He showed Ed Rosenthal. Ed Rosenthal went on to write the story about the myrcene and the mangoes, and you'll get like, you know, it was the beginning of the entourage effect, which is Dr. Ethan Russo coined the term. And then, of course, I would be remiss if I didn't mention Dr. Lester Grinspoon, who ran the Harvard Medical School for 27 years and wrote an amazing book called Marijuana Reconsidered about his young son, Danny, who died of leukemia but used cannabis medicinally towards the end of his life. He called it the ensemble. So you had entourage with Dr. Ethan and ensemble with Dr. Lester Grinspoon. And that conversation started in Skunkman Sam's. You know, once again, dude, this guy has birthed so much of our industry. It's ridiculous. If you get to hang out with him, if you get lucky enough, you learn all this stuff. It's like, oh my God, like when he's on Hash Church and he's like, I did that. Like, he is not joking. He literally did all of it. It's ridiculous. So shout out to Skunkman Sam.
So with the separation of terpenes and with what you were just saying there, So terpenes then become a variable. They become a modulator. They become.
Well, that was what they were all suggesting. And when Sam, how he turned us all on was he'd get us to smoke pure THCA out of his roer. And it was strong, like pretty strong, but pretty one-dimensional.
Mhm.
Not that I'd ever thought like this prior to this. I wasn't thinking this is a one-dimensional high. It was just like a heavy kind of like, okay, I'm sitting on his couch, I'm all baked. And then he's like, okay, he's all excited. He's like, try this now. And he like pulls out like this little micro pipette with like an eighth or a tenth or a whatever of a drop, right? Like a fraction of a drop. And he drops it onto another bowl that he's now put on of THCA. And he's like, try that now. And I'm like, all right, I'm pretty baked right now, but all right, I'll fucking hit another one. So I hit this one, and truly, it was revelatory in the sense that it was so much more. And I didn't even know, because I'd never perceived the differences. I was just like, if you would have asked me, I would have been like, oh, I was stoned. I wasn't like, he really turned me on to this like internal, like, let's feel exactly what this feels like. Let's focus. The guy can get you so high that you're at the outer edges of your central nervous system, just trying to stay conscious and not release your bowels. I'm telling you, man.
Baby stoned.
Guys on another level. I sat next to him and watched him smoke 60 bong rips, like practically in a row, in probably about an hour. 60.
Oh, wow.
60.
It's one per minute.
No, knowing that,
absolutely.
10 minutes. Hold, Pedro, I got a quick question before you get to that. Who telling that story makes me remember on Hash Church, someone had a box of, I think, terpenes, like terpenes in vials. And I believe the idea was you guys were trying them maybe with THCA isolate, maybe. And I don't know if that's the case, but I know you guys were going through and just trying the quiver of terpenes. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah, I did a couple of those. That was Tony started Blue River Extracts, and I started Blue River Extracts Canada, and we partnered up and we did a Bubbleman brand deal down at Harborside where we did the first solventless pen. Solventless, totally full of terpenes, hydrocarbons. Ha ha ha. So that was what was the question? I'm pretty stoned.
I just asked if you remember that. I was trying to remember who that was that brought.
I did two videos. They were called Terpene Gauntlets. I did one with D420K,
okay.
and I did another one with this kid Brett from he was a solventless extractor in Vancouver. West Coast something. Terrible.
Okay. It wasn't Brett Maverick. That's a US guy that I kind of learned.
No, but dude, how about that? His name was mentioned in the fucking chat today. And furthermore, I was talking to Brian from D-Nail the other day, and he was telling me about his partner, and I'm like, your partner? He's like, yeah, my partner Chaz. I'm like, dude, time out. Your partner, you make bangers, and your partner's name is Chaz? He's like, yeah, dude. He's like, yeah, dude. He's like, he doesn't like it. I'm like, well, do you know the story? And he's like, what's the story? I heard like Etienne knew a guy named Chaz or something. I'm like, no. The story was from this kid, Brett Maverick. And he went on Hash Church and he told this story. I can't remember the episode. I kind of wish I had a better breakdown of everything that went down.
There's been so many.
Take 100 years, but he told the story of his roommate Chaz, who used to fucking torch his bangers instead of cleaning them. He'd take an oil hit and then he just hit it, and so he was like, "Bro, you got to stop chazzing my bangers." And he's like, "That's how it became chazzing."
No
chazzing my bangers.
It just makes sense to me. Like I thought it was just like elementary, like this.
Dude, 100%. He told that story, dude. It's from a guy named Chaz. So D-Nail's partner is named Chaz. So we were talking about Brett Maverick just the other day, and then he got brought up today.
I have no idea what that dude is up to nowadays, but I watched his videos for pretty much 3 days religiously, among a couple others, including Nadi and some others on YouTube before I blasted for the first time. And it was an open blast. It was in a glass tube. Brett Maverick and
Brett Maverick. Yeah, of course. He taught tons of people all sorts of shit.
Yeah, and then a couple years later, I ended up putting a 12-part series out on how to safely run a closed loop system, and that was the whole intent behind it, was to do it safely. And I hope that's what people got out of it. But I've got a real serious question for you. Can you define the term hash?
Can I define the term hash? I mean, I'm kind of old school. So for me, hash is microencapsulated resin glands. To me, it doesn't matter if they're powdered. It doesn't matter if they're pressed together. It just matters that they're still intact and they haven't been milked of all their. If they've been melted or milked or washed through, to me, that's just been oil. I'm not worried about the semantics. If people want to call their oil hash, whatever. But I'm of the school of Rob Clark and Skunkman Sam and this sort of older. I do want to keep a connection. As much as I respect even my part on playing on creating the new world of hash, some component of it, I do want to maintain the connection and always pay homage to the roots of hashish and these old screening techniques and pressing techniques. And they also made oil, but they didn't call it hash. They called it hash oil. It was oil, right? They made hash, which was called hash, and then they made oil, which was called hash oil. And trust me, they would never make oil from weed. These motherfuckers would like look down upon you if you were doing that. They made it with straight hash. When men were men.
Well, yeah, as far as I'm concerned, yeah, the hash is stopped with hash. When you get to rosin, it's hash rosin. It's just the way it is. But having said that, what then is Frenchy style, rolling a hot water bottle over his hash? Is that decarb hash still hash?
That's not really decarbing the hash, and that's not really. I mean, it's people know it as Frenchy tech, but that tech was around for a very long time. I know it as a Turkish tech. I shared that tech in probably 2006, maybe on Overgrow or IC Mag. There's still the video if you punch in Bubbleman pressing hash. I think it's up on Full Melt Bubble now since 2008. But it's just a real simple cellophane, building the packets, pouring the hash, using the boiling hot water inside a bottle and just pressing on maybe a heated plate that you take, marble plate that you put in the oven. Very simple process. It's the Turkish have been doing it for a very long time, and it's still hash to me. Absolutely. You haven't like extracted the resin from it. Everything's still there. Even if you took hash and smashed it in your fingers. I mean, like I said, the semantics of it, it's kind of like the solventless thing. It's kind of like, as a community, as these slang terms, and are part of just a community, not necessarily a business or industry, there's always going to be people calling them trichromes and, saying things like this. And as I get older, I'm like,
just gotta let them go.
I spent all my fucks. I had a huge bag of them when I was younger. All these different fucks I had to give, but now I've got none left. So I've got no fucks left.
Well, good. That's a great way to ask this question. Then, is there a wrong way to produce hash?
Well, I mean, for me, there is. It's subjective. It's subjective. So like, like when people are like, yeah, you gotta use dry ice and really shake it really hard. It's like, okay, I understand that you're perceiving this enormous amount of material falling through the bottom of the bag and you're thinking this is amazing. But if you used a prosthetic and you went closer, you would realize that 90+% of what's falling is contaminants and 10% of what's falling is actually hash. And so I teach this to dispensary bud tenders all the time, where I'm like, listen, I heard you just now. That guy said he wanted the best bang for his buck. Instead of selling him the $50 gram of bubble hash, you sold him the $15 gram of dry sift. Pull the camera out, take the picture, show her what it looks like. It's like he would need to buy 10 grams of this hash, 10 grams, in order to get the same amount of heads as he got out of this 1 gram of bubble hash. That's $150 now versus $50. He thinks he's getting the deal. He thinks he's paying 1/3 less, but in reality, he's paying like 3 times more.
Just watered down.
10 times more. It's just watered down, man. It is what it is. But yeah, everyone can make hash how they want to make hash. I like to purify it so it like speaks to me. Like I have a religious moment. It's like I've just haven't eaten in a week and I just saw the most delicious, like my favorite meal, whatever that would be at the time, and I'm like watering, my mouth's watering. That's what I like my hash to do. And for me, you don't get that if you go mediocre styles.
I just got to say, you brought it up in the last 2 minutes. I still, because of you on the Hash Church, probably 7-8 years ago, I still use the term contaminant when it comes to anything hash related. Even when it comes to residual solvents in my hash, I call that a contaminant because it's
Yeah.
not supposed to be there. Fats and lipids, in my opinion, contaminant. Anything but cannabinoids and terpenes and the other beneficial things that we're really looking to refine in this plant, in my opinion, contaminant.
Yeah, well, it is. If it's not glandular, it's not really necessary. That being said, there's something to be said for the laboratory where everything gets made. And I don't know if you ever did any mop-up trips back in the LSD days, but people that were taking the crystal LSD, maybe a gram of it, turn it into like 10,000 hits of acid. You'd take all these little jars that you'd use to like do this process and get it all to dissolve. And then at the end, when the jars were kind of empty, they'd like clean them all out with orange juice, and you do like a mop-up trip. And so the laboratory inside that trichome head is a neat place. And in particular, I like the fact that it's held in stasis. It's the greatest place to contain resin while you're not using it. There's like no better place to just like, here, keep where could we possibly keep all of our hash? Keep it in the head where it grows. Just keep it right there.
But if you were to leave that head on the plant and let it go past its maturity date, it would continue to age and ripen. And even if you left it exposed to, say, atmospheric exposure or heat or any of those things, might mature that trichome head and what's contained in it further. One of the things we talked about pre-show was just a basic terp cooler. I'd love if you could bring up yours, because
Sure.
Yeah.
there's a place to keep this once it has been harvested, once it has been processed. It's not gonna stay good forever if it's exposed to heat, really, I guess, atmospheric exposure, or maybe time.
Wait, Marcus, are my jars gonna fit in there?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You just
Okay.
you take out the top shelf.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
There you go. There you go.
Just like it.
Zip jars all day.
I'll
All
show
right,
you.
sorry for
That makes a lot more sense. Yeah.
These
You get two
are
levels out of that.
these are Patrick's jars.
Oh, there you go.
beautiful. So there we
So
go.
tell us about this
all I
thing,
need to
man.
know.
I hear it's battery operated, which, I love my battery operated rigs, battery operated terp cooler. What's that?
Yeah, this is the baller fridge. So buddy of mine made this fridge and he's selling them around and got in touch with me and was like, dude, you're the perfect. He made it like in Fahrenheit, which apparently is like, I guess, was difficult. He wanted it in Fahrenheit for his American brethren. Yeah, so
Well,
it's
thank you
it
to
stays
you.
around 32 Fahrenheit. Plugs in. Got a little 7-hour battery that you can just plug into the back of it.
The
And,
battery is the
it's
most
fucking
attractive part to me.
Oh, I love it, man. Being able to, and for $20, you get an extra battery. I roll with 2, and I've got 10 to 14 hours of my hash being cool. It's just nice for sure. I did want to talk about some of the cured hash though, because when I first met Sam, he started smoking hash with me. I think it was 12 years old the first time I smoked it, and he kept his in his freezer, so he was preserving it in the freezer. I smoked that hash until it was 22 years old, and there was something to be said about it. Same with some dry sift I did back in the day for the Great Gardener. It was a sweet skunk variety, and it was properly cured so that the heads they close off like little raisins and they seal everything in. And if they don't cure like that, they don't preserve the same way. So this is why the Afghans and the Moroccans, they like cure that weed out, get those heads to like shrivel up into little raisins, then they seal themselves up, and you do get some magic in there. And when it's Skunkman Sam's material, it's like extra magic you can't even fucking imagine. But yeah, the dry sift, I remember taking it to Amsterdam one year, and I was with Tony from Sagamarta Seeds, and we were at it was Hank who owns the Bulldogs, he had an apartment in the Liza Plain, and we were up there with a bunch of cannabis people, Breeder Steve and all these other folks. I think DJ Short might have been there that year. And Tony was like, "Oh man, you got something nice I can smoke." And I'm like, "Dude, I got something pretty special right now. This is like sweet skunk, super flavorful, hazy flavor, really well cured, and then static sifted by yours truly to 99.99999 heads, like just ridiculous. So full melt, like ridiculous." So I give him a hit of this, and he exhales it, and he lays down on the couch bed thing that was in the room, and he was like, "Oh my God, dude, that was so fucking smooth. That was so," he's like, "I miss that. I miss cured resin." Because the younger generation, from what I'm talking about right now, they want all of the most caustic terpenes that were never inhaled back in the day. These were cured out of the flower because they were harsh, right? They're monoterpenes, they're harsh. And so now everyone wants them in their oil. So they're like, they take a big rip and they're like, "Oh," and you see them like turn red, and you're like, and don't get me wrong, I love it too. But you got to try some cured proper fucking resin sometime, because it has a place in the quiver as well.
Yeah, those
something that just blows out so beautiful and perfumes the room, and you're just
let me pull my archive out, because I've been for years and years and years, probably 6-7 years now, I've been touting the benefits of fresh frozen and really capturing the essence of that plant as it exists the day of harvest or thereabouts. And you're not wrong. Typically those do prevent a more harsher hit. But what I'm understanding over my years of trying this is that also the more hazy, fruity, I hate to say it, but even the, as most people understand it, sativa type varieties tend to lean better into that than they do a bubble hash. What I have in my archive is not only flower, but extracts dating all the way to 2015. Some of these strains I'm still growing. What I can tell you is every time I open these jars, they are not what they were 5-6 years ago when I first processed them. And that's
it can't be
a huge part because I don't vac seal them and I don't freeze them, right? These are kept in a safe that's just in a room temperature, but I have also kept the same jars in a vac sealed bag in a freezer, just a regular fridge, bottom drawer freezer, for the course of 3+ years, and they have not changed a single bit. So I think that the extracts, even after the fact, even if they're fresh frozen, can mature. And those terpenes will go away even after the process. But to me, those fresh frozen extracts, after they've matured, which I think is a degradation if they've 3, 4, 6 months old or whatever, I think they all start to kind of taste like the same thing. Do you now you probably don't experience that in something that is cured and then stored, right? It's kind of like it's going to hold.
I mean, if you can cure. Listen, when you preserve it in the freezer, it's preserved. You could leave it there for like 10 years and open that up. It's going to be very, very much the same thing. But if you're making like fresh frozen extract and then you're like letting it sit at room temperature, you're going to off-gas those monoterpenes. That light fraction that's at the top should come off. And so back in the day, the way the old school grower was trained, they didn't like the smell of that. They waited till that went away because it was sharp. And then when they smelt this more florally, the sesquiterpenoids that come up under those monos, the next bouquet, and sometimes they're substantially different. And I'm sure it works both ways. Sometimes the top one is the better smell and a lesser smell comes up, and other times the top one's the lesser and the bottom one comes up and it's a nicer bouquet. I think the fact is that for a long time, there's been a lot of inbreeding in cannabis and mutation and like not really stable breeding. People not really, like Mendel, we all learned in like grade 10 biology, the monk, he did the peas. He's like, you got to have like 100,000 units to plant. Otherwise, if you plant like 10,000 or 5,000 or 1,000, that's the equivalent of living in a trailer park and just having lots of babies with your sister. They're not going to look good. They're not going to have good genetics, and it's going to be
not very diverse.
Long. It's not diverse enough. Diverse is like 100,000. You start getting into that 100,000, you can really find some amazing shit. And I think that less and less people are growing with genetics. I mean, I was talking to Dr. Mark Lewis the other day from Maypro, and they have everything. They have all these incredible profiles, dominating in every terpene you could imagine, dominating in whatever cannabinoid you could imagine. He's got like these CBG and CBD flavors that are like super low in THC that you could just puff all day. They taste like your favorite weed, like 4 and 5% terpene content on a 0.3% THC. Like, that's neat. You know, like I wouldn't smoke it personally, but I know many people that would.
What's your favorite part about cannabis extracts then? Because for me, it is the terpenes. I mean, the whole thing, growing it, processing it, smoking it, sharing it, talking about it, researching it, literally everything about this is, for me, terpenes. Cannabinoids, THC, I mean, CBG is pretty sweet, but THC is kind of secondary to me as the terpenes. What's your favorite part about extracts themselves?
Well, I love the volatile organic compounds as well. And I would tell you that almost guaranteed some of the terpenes that you like are not terpenes. They're thiols and they're esters. And so there was a really good article that was released recently, and I wish I could remember.
I might have it here.
Who sent it to me? Yeah, there's a graph where he shows all the isobutanol, like he shows the molecules. It's kind of like a honeycomb. And this isn't new. The hops industry has known this for a long time. Nick Ziegler used to come on to our this is it, abstract. So if you can find the like little page, they've got like a 1-pager. I think it's a link from this. There it is. If you click on that. So that's talking about this big, that thing right in the middle. If you click on it, it should open by itself. Yeah, there you go. So you see like these different molecules. These are not terpenes. These are like esters and thiols. And so all these different flavors that we love so much that we've sort of been giving to as terpenes are also other compounds. So I definitely am all about the flavor myself, although like I said, I wouldn't really probably be interested in smoking the most flavorful hash if it didn't simultaneously get me pretty baked. Pretty baked is a pretty important factor in all of this, but as I've spoiled myself over the years, and I got the honey bananas and the Trop Nana and the Frankie's Haze and the Cherry Chem. These are all wonderful. I'm blessed to have flavors in the arsenal right now.
But so it's the effect for you ultimately about the extract.
Well, it's all an effect. Even the smell is an effect, right? Like you smell it and then you have an effect. So yeah, it's definitely, I mean, also the sharing and I'm a lifer, right? I've loved cannabis. I don't drink alcohol at all.
The experience as a whole. The
Thank
taste,
you, Superior
the
Bud.
smell,
Better way of putting it.
the sharing.
It's everything.
The high, right.
Going with that, with the experience, Marcus, are you of the belief that everybody's experience is individual, i.e., what may be sweet and act as an indica, as a downer for one person, may be the opposite for another person?
Right, exactly. And why is that? Because there are two things to pay attention to when you pay attention to sensory science. And if we're going to be sensory scientists, the first two things that you pay attention to, which Nick Ziegler mentioned this on Hash Church, this is the guy that discovered over 1,400 thiols present in hops when he worked at Yakima Chief Hops. So really interesting. These hops people have known about these different compounds for a very long time. Cannabis people are really just catching on. And oh yeah, that's hilarious. Survivor one time. What was I going to say? What's that? Yeah, the cardboard. He's like, where's cardboard on that chart?
We're all giggling.
Dude, don't knock the pizza boxes, man. We fucking dried a lot of hash in those bad boys. The other thing I have to say on the pizza boxes is that I have a macro camera where I can get so close and look at the hash, like closer than anyone before me had ever gotten, hands down. And so when I hear people be like, oh, there's probably tons of fiber in his hash, it's like, please go through any of my old pictures and find a fucking piece of fiber in my hash. It's literally so close. If there was a single fiber, you would just see it sticking out like the sorest thumb. But I do want to remember where I was going with what I was saying.
Yeah, you're going with the terpenes individual experience. Everybody's got their own.
Right. So Nick was mentioning when you get into sensory science, you want to find out two things. The first thing you want to find out is where you have a sensitivity. So if you are hypersensitive to whatever terpene, osamine, it could be a thiol, one of these garlic, isobutanol, like it could be a whole variety of different things. But if you have a particular body that's just hypersensitive to this one thing, you have to mark that down and be cognizant of it. Secondary, you also need to try and find where your blind spots are. That's the harder one. And if you can find where your blind spots are, you'll have a better understanding of why certain things affect you the way they affect you when they may affect someone differently. Because cilantro is very much like this. Certain people have the full experience and they love cilantro. Other people are missing a few components. They have blind spots. And so those are the people that generally don't like cilantro. They're like, oh, it smells like soap and it's just like weird.
Yep.
Like, yeah, because you're missing like a super important component that ties it all together and makes it good. But if you have a blind spot and you don't know what it is and you have sensitivities and you don't pay attention to them, then it's harder to go in and create valid data with your sensory science. Now, we're all doing mini sensory science, so I do think it's very individual. It doesn't mean that Pedro and me could have a super similar, like we just have similar sensitivities, similar blind spots. It doesn't mean you won't meet people that are just like, holy shit, like I think he's tasting this the same way I'm tasting it. But if you're in a room full of like 4 or 5 people, I guarantee you most of you are going to all have different experiences. It's subjective.
Are you still using the term bioassay? I remember that from the Hash Church.
Yeah, like when I test it on myself, that's a bioassay, absolutely.
Because I'll be honest, I still repeat that every now and then.
It's a legitimate term.
Good to know, because I've got a lot of illegitimate terms in my vocabulary. Speaking of terpenes, or excuse me, volatile organic compounds, as they're now known, do you have a favorite one?
I mean, you know what? I don't pretend to know enough of what they actually smell like individually. I have, and I wouldn't say I have favorite profiles, although I do really love the haze profile.
Same.
That really pure haze profile. When something's grown and expressed like so perfectly, where you can taste the strength in the genetics, you can taste the experience in the grower, you can taste sometimes the terroir and all of these things, and this plant has just expressed itself 10 out of 10 on every, checked every box. Whatever the profile is, I'll love it. Whether it's gassy, whether it's fruity, whether it's hazy, whether it's spicy, whether it's, whatever flavor.
Just that experience.
GMO, even a blue dream, like whatever. If it's a great version of it, I'll really like it.
Are you throwing shade towards Blue Dream?
No, but a lot of people do.
Absolutely do.
Yeah, they really
Absolutely.
do. I was actually looking for seeds recently. I was like, maybe I should throw Blue Dream back in the quiver. That was one of the first strains I grew.
Dude,
and
listen, there's a reason why so many people loved it. And of course, human beings, the way we are, is if too many people like something, we're like, well, that can't be that good.
Going down the road of the individual experience, and like I said, everybody having their own. What I was kind of getting at under the blankets there was that my frustration with the indica and sativa in the commercial market, it frustrates me to no end when they require things to be labeled as indica sativa, and even more so when customers shop based on those two terms, and sometimes exclusively those two terms. It just bothers me.
Well, you know what? It does me too. And we had a big conversation about this on Hash Church one day, and we're all going off and like, fuck it, we gotta teach everyone about all these different compounds and modulating effects and what they're doing, and people, and then Debbie Goldsberry is like, guys, listen, please. I love you guys. I love your passion. I love the energy that you speak with. But let me tell you something from a person who has been selling Californian legal weed for 35 years, first at Berkeley Patients Group and now at Magnolia. Every customer comes in and wants two things. They want the highest THC for the lowest dollar amount. So this is not some new fucking thing that started with legal weed. This has been since stores have existed. Mm-hmm. This is what people do.
So what does it take? Just a massive
I wash my
marketing
hands.
campaign?
Well, and that's the kind of the
Well, you
point of
can't. No. Do you control what society is natural? Like, do you try to drive society, or is there a point where you have to let society drive itself? Even though we're the outliers, right? We're way on the outer edges. We're like the cannabis
But isn't there
shamans,
value
looking
in
at these people like they're
education?
fucking
we're the
insane.
fucking people that call terpenes
see that
VOCs.
Dude, we're
Now we
fucking,
are.
we're cannabis narcissists. Only we care about this much. No one else gives a flying.
But I feel like everyone should, Mark.
I know. I feel the same way. I'm telling you, I feel the same way. But I go to a dispensary and talk to all the people that come in and be like, hey, can we get one of those chocolate Rocco pre-roll joints? Give me one of those peach rings pre-roll joints. Hey, that's got the fake terpenes in it, right? Yeah. Give me 2 of those.
How much are they?
Is it dipped in that super?
Okay.
Is it dipped in that super mediocre, harsh dry sift that's like not really dry sift? It's like floor scraping. Oh, good. Yeah, give me 4 of those.
Trimmed in, sipped, fucking, let's
Oh,
get
it's
it.
too real, dude. It's too real. Oh my god, dude, you have traveled all over the world specifically for this plant, and to whether to research it, to be an activist, just to maybe taste it yourself. Do you have a favorite destination that you've gone just for cannabis? And if you do, can you tell us about it?
I like that.
Oh, geez, my favorite destination. Well, I'll tell you, like, I went to the Maha Kumbh Mela in 1998 in India, in northern India, and that was pretty fucking amazing. Like, that was some crazy shit altogether. But I'd have a hard time, and India really is the original dreads. This is like a picture of me in 1998 with my Baba friend Pashupati.
Whoa, what the
No
fuck,
way.
In a
That's a-
Shiva temple. I wish it. Oh, there it is.
dude? Look at that. That's a
Holy
fucking
smokes.
OG picture, dude.
Dude, I thought I found some old pictures of you. That's old. That
That's
predates any of the ones I found.
Yeah, dude. Yeah,
That's
dude.
fucking
But
That's
I
great.
would be remiss if I didn't mention Jamaica, because Jamaica, like the people and the food and the culture and the music and the herbs. I think it's the best hash I've ever made in my life when I used to link up with the doctor and I'd climb the fucking Coral Mountain with fucking Remo and fucking Pete Brady from High Times. And we'd go up there and this guy with like 12-foot long dreads all wrapped on his head with a beautiful grow. He'd be like, let me make you something to drink. And he'd like hand twist sugar cane and then like pull passion fruits. And dude, he's making us all this juice and he's making it in a coconut husk thing. And we're just like, this is fucking crazy. Like,
That's
so crazy,
awesome.
dude. They called him Geronimo because he drove like 100 kilometers an hour down the strip in the grill, ripping. And they'd be like, Geronimo! So Jamaica for sure. I've made a lot of hash in Jamaica, some amazing experience. I went there with Wally Duck and Gypsy Nirvana back in like the early 2000s. I made hash with Ramo. I made hash with like so many great people. I did like open seminars like in the early 2000s, just like my buddy guy would have a hotel. He'd be like, man, would you mind coming to the hotel and just showing like a bunch of the people? I just like drove to Westmoreland, which was totally just a random neighborhood where people live really in huts and, sort of zinc fence roofed houses and stuff. And I walked in there. I didn't know anyone. I was like, hey, like, who grows the best weed here? And they're all like, oh, you got to go see Ziggy, man, Ziggy. So I link up with this guy, Ziggy. I've been friends with this guy for almost 30 years. I gave him a fucking set of bubble bags. Years later, he won the Cannabis Cup in Jamaica while I was there. Like, it was a fucking crazy experience. In fact, he won. Junior took second, and this other brethren took third. I taught them all how to make hash,
Hell
like
yeah.
15 to 20 years prior.
That's
It
cool.
was
So
amazing.
Hey, dude, I'd be remiss if I didn't, give you props on these 2 cups behind me. They were for hydrocarbon extracts, but I learned a lot from you and the people you had on your shows well before 2019 when I won those cups. I had been extracting for probably 6 years or so at that, maybe 5-6 years at that point. And, it's not just the hydrocarbon process that leads to a great extract. It's the knowledge around the resin itself. It's the capability of being or knowing, in some cases, a good grower. It's from start to finish. You can't have good hash without having good input. And we used to joke about how it was always fire in, fire out. And then CRC came along. And we always said we couldn't polish a turd. and then CRC came along. And I still
Shots fired.
I still think that you are not getting a good quality product on the end of that. But I mean, is there times when like something like that is okay, when we're actually like really filtering our product, like when we're trying to refine a poor quality input, right? Is it ever okay to even use a poor quality input, or should we just burn it and start over?
I mean, sure. Listen, the most popular product is always poor quality. It's always the mediocre. It's always the masses, right? Like in anything, right? Like we're not all driving Rolls Royces. I'm sure our cars are probably kind of in the middle, like of the row. Like not, we're not driving broken down Civics, but
I mean,
maybe
I told
we have
you
like a decent.
pre-show I had a cigarette lighter until last year, so.
Right, but that means you got something recently. So no, I think it's whatever people want, like listen, I used to be so obsessed with needing everyone, and this was my argument too, which was always a great argument. I'd have my full melt bubble. I had it for like 2 or 3 years as I started this argument. People would be like, "Oh, you don't smoke joints anymore?" I'm like, "No." And they're like, "Oh, if I had hash like that, I think I'd still smoke joints." And I'd be like, "Yeah, but you can't know." What do you mean? Well, you don't have hash like this. How could you fucking know? If you had it every day, every time you wanted to get high, and it was just right there, this hash, do you think you would be rolling fucking
Why
joints?
would you choose
I don't. Well, maybe not actually. So I'd have this conversation with different people, and I was under the impression that there was no way on God's green earth anyone would choose anything over this. It was just that fucking good. But then I learned that people do choose different things. Even when, as a photographer, I would take like 10 amazing pictures. Only one to me was amazing. My wife thought they were all amazing because she's supportive. But then society, if I posted them all, the one that I didn't like the most, usually the one I liked the least, would be the one that somehow hit a nerve with people, and they would either have a conversation about it or a lot of attention to that one photo. And it was just it's never what you think. The world, you're unique, and the world is different.
That's so true, and that's why I started growing to help myself. You know what I mean? I went and got my medical card. I saw a reason to get it. I saw an opportunity to utilize the medicine, and I have been doing that ever since. Not everyone's goal is that. Some people just, want to smoke what's in front of them. But I think there's got to be some connection in between those just casual consumers and that just whatever narcissistic connoisseurs that we are, in terms of meeting in the middle and still creating a good craft product, because there's just so much trash out there and it's so disappointing to me. And I'm not going to sit here and say everything I've produced has been, top shelf or whatever. I've definitely gone through my struggles in my growing career, but I think I know good weed and bad weed, and it seems like there's too much bad weed right now.
Fortunately,
the scary thing is this. Go ahead, Pedro.
It's the knowledge of, and it's the lack of the willingness for the customer to want to learn enough to purchase a better product, to go in and get a vape pen, but get a quality vape pen. They just want that $10, $15 vape pen, get it for me and let's get out of here. They want that $25, quarter and get the fuck out of here, But
yeah, but they're also stopping and getting a Happy Meal at McDonald's. Like it's not,
exactly.
Everyone's been trained by convenience. Here's the thing that's will really hurt your soul. If that hurts your soul, that there's too much bad weed out there. In Canada, we tried to make product that is just of the highest quality. And like, first of all, the people who would buy that product are also almost exclusively the people who do not want to support legal government weed, as they call it. So right off the bat, the only people who would even maybe support you aren't supporting you, and they're doing all their own shit through their medical license or gray market because nobody gives a fuck anymore. And that's fine. I support all of it. But if you try to start a company in Canada and only release the highest quality, cleanest product, where you really, and it'll be so expensive because you won't believe what you have to pay for the material and the taxes, and you'll make 20% or 17% of the 100% of the profit. You'll make like this tiny little, like less than 20% of that.
Rough.
And it's super expensive, and packaging and this, that, and regulations, and you can't advertise, and you can't do this, and you can't do that. And suddenly you're like, The only way you could really make money is if you like mine a bunch of diamonds for someone, or if you just like, it's not about the terpiest, loudest. Like you should make some of that, but it just won't sell as much as the guy who's doing like distillate pens with fake terps for $15 a pop.
And
He's
just
selling like
cranking it
$7
out.
million
So
worth
scrape the good
a
shit
month.
off the top and then fucking
Yeah,
get
because
the
it's
rest
what
out of
people
it.
will support. It's what where they'll spend their money, and it's just
It's too true,
shocked
man.
me, bro.
Yeah, it's
It
too
shocks
true.
me.
Pedro works in the commercial industry, and Superior Buds and I have certainly done our research in terms of getting our own licenses here in Michigan. And at a certain point, it becomes economically unfeasible to even enter the market. And that's kind of where we're at right now and have been for the last year and a half. If you're not already in the black, good luck.
It's just great, man.
Yeah,
It
when
really is.
COVID
You're both
hit,
in Michigan?
the ROI. Yeah,
Yeah, we are.
he's in
Superior.
the Lower Peninsula, and I'm in the UP up on Lake Superior. Go figure.
Okay, word. Yeah, I'm on the lake.
He
Big
can
Lake
see
Superior.
Canada from his
Yeah,
house.
yeah,
Hey,
yeah.
actually,
My backyard
Bubble Man,
camera points.
I've got a fun trivia question for you. What is the only city in the United States that sits directly north of the Canadian border?
Jeez.
I'll give you a hint. It's in
The
Michigan.
only
Yeah, it's probably in Michigan.
We both know this one.
Isn't it Superior?
Detroit?
It's Detroit. It sits directly north of Windsor, Ontario.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. I know you can see it from Windsor. I've looked at it before. I've
You
been
might
there.
be able to slingshot it, actually.
I didn't know it was the only city though.
Well, the only one I'm aware of, the only major U.S. city. I should,
Yeah.
the only major United States city. That's
because all of Canada is like on the bottom, like whatever the parallel is. It's like super. We're 40 minutes away from the border, most of us.
Yeah, 80% or something like that.
Yeah, I would say it's at least 80%.
It's kind of wild. And actually, 75% of Michiganders, as we call ourselves, live in the southern half of the Lower Peninsula. So Superior is up there with, probably less than 25%, maybe like 10%.
We looked it up one night on the whatever show. It's very sparse up here.
Yeah. You guys got some big counties up there.
Yeah, we have one area code for the whole UP.
Yeah, that's wild. That's so wild. So one of my biggest concerns, we were talking about vape pens earlier. One of my biggest concerns about vape pens when it comes from the rosin side of things is it always seems to be decarboxylated. And me being me, I love my terpenes. I'm always worried about my terpenes and preserving my terpenes. Every time I hear decarboxylated, I think about distillate, how I was trained in distillate, and the fact that you have to decarboxylate your distillate. And who cares where the terpenes go? They're not going to end up in your final product, right? You're just looking for that 99.98% THC distillate or whatever. Because why? It's going into edibles. So terpenes don't really matter.
All I have to say is terp burps.
Well, they destroy it. The distillate people were clueless that should have been steam distilling or hydrovac diffusing their terpenes off of the plant first.
Cold trapping
and
and
then
something.
Well, you need to do a proper terpene extraction, and then you just run the rest for your distillate. The reason you have to decarboxylate in short path molecular distillation is because the vacuum is lost if it's not decarboxylated. If there's a carboxylic acid ring in there, it fucks with the vacuum, and the process doesn't work. So these guys take hot plates, they put the resin just like open, like blasting, just like smoking off in the room.
Oh,
this is very different than what we do with rosin, where it's in a glass reactor, it's sealed, it's under pressure, it's low temp, it's long, it burps. There's software that allows the burping to happen. All of this sort of stuff can go on in a much more delicate and preservatory way, where the terpenes and the volatile organic compounds exactly. That's the rosin reactor. That's at my facility in Delta right now. So it's just got the little computer sitting on the brain, which has 2 PFDs. You can put 2 of these reactors. So you can see the blue and the yellow cable going into the brain under the computer. On the other side, you can see a black little wire hose on the far right here up against the wall from the brain. That is for nitrogen. You can have a nitrogen flush. So you release all oxygen from the tank before you go forward. And then, there's the hardware that's on top, which has the pressure relief valve, the pressure gauge. It's got the temperature sensor. It's got a couple of solenoids, one for flushing in the nitrogen and one for burping and releasing the CO2 that's building up through the decarboxylation. And I can monitor this process from home on my phone. And it's done now. We've turned it off, and I'll collect that resin. The heater's off, everything's off, and I'll go and collect that resin on Monday, and we'll get it into vape carts.
Did you? I mean, I knew you could monitor it remotely. Did you shut it off and everything remotely as well?
We shut it off remotely. Yeah, no one's at the lab right now, so we just turned it off remotely. In fact, my friend Corey, who invented it from Sample Automation, he actually shut it off. So shout out, Corey. Thanks for shutting it off. And I know Andrew was also watching it in New Hampshire. So we had Vancouver, Florida, and New Hampshire all monitoring the decarboxylation rate and pressure rate of ours.
So it just like, does it hold it at like a temperature or whatever until you come back then?
Oh, it'll go down to ambient. It'll go down to like 60, whatever it is in the room. And it's sealed too. So now all those terpenes that are in the top of the lid will reflux down. And the way the lid is, it kind of goes in. So they don't go all the way down. They end up going around to the clamp, and then they drip right in. They kind of fall.
Not down the walls.
So I could zoom in on this picture. It's not going to let me, but that's one of the things I wanted to ask about, is because talking about decarboxylating cannabis and potentially losing terpenes. We know that, you know, most of the local rosin guys are making their rosin, I guess, pod material via decarboxylation, and they're doing it in an enclosed vessel. I similarly create sauce or crash out my THCA in my solution, you know, using a pressurized vessel. Is there any concern for loss of terpenes? And does the temperature matter? Does the time matter? Does, obviously, I assume making sure the vessel
just like rosin
matter?
You must know, being here on the Variables podcast, that variables always matter. And as you change the variables, you can hone in different sweet spots depending on what you're looking for. So with rosin, it's time and pressure and heat. With this unit, it's also time and pressure and heat. So you just have to make sure. You could go as low and slow as you want. You could take 11 days if you really wanted to. But you have to understand too, like when rosin first came out, like every BHO guy and their dog was saying the same thing. Oh my God, the terpenes are going to be destroyed. There's no way you're going to be able to preserve terpenes with that kind of temperature. But in the end, rosin ended up being super, super tasty and super, you know, and it's not like people are pressing it at 100 degrees. Like it's super tasty at like 170, 180 degrees Fahrenheit, still has great tasting flavors. So I think that we assume more than what is really happening. And we can check with COAs and chemical breakdowns. And, you know, as we get, once again, we're only testing like a fraction of the terpenes that are present. We're not testing for thiols and thiolates or esters or esterification of terpenes that were once one thing and have altered and changed in the process. We don't perceive any of that. So it becomes almost a moot question in the sense that until we can go in, just like what's your favorite terpene? Well, until you can have every terpene put in front of you in a fully honest extraction with no footprint and no weirdness.
Understand what they are, because it's, you know, you can have them in front of you, but you have to understand what they are.
But you know what? I think I can answer that question, and I can only answer that question based on experience, but I can still answer that question, and it's terpinolene, because every strain I grow has the highest terpene test result is always terpinolene, be it Durban poison, grapefruit Durban, lime skunk, clementine. All these strains I grow and all the strains I love the most are always the highest in terpinolene. Now, I know that's not for everybody. I know it's a volatile terpene. I know it tends to be in the hazy type, citrusy type varieties. Not everyone likes that, but for me, that's what I love, and so that's what I keep growing and keep processing. But
here's the question.
That's just the leader in the profile, right?
Yeah. So have you ever smelled pure terpinolene?
I have, but it was from a lab. Like, I don't know. I've never isolated it myself, right? So, but I've smelled
it this way. When people smoke a flower that has CBD in it, right? There's all sorts of things in it that's got CBD in it. They all do the same thing. They say, oh, I like this CBD flower. It's like, oh, is that, what do you mean CBD flower? Like, that's just CBD? Well, no, there's like, terpenes and CBG and some other things. I'm like, well, what makes you call it CBD then? Oh, I don't really know. I just do. Well, it's the same thing when we like, oh, like my favorite terpene is ocimene. How could you fucking possibly know that? Well, because it's the dominant terpene, right? But here's the thing. Terpenes are like this upside down triangle that sits on a tiny fraction of things called thiols. Thiols are responsible for the skunk smell. They're really rank and they can get into some really unique flavor profiles. They can shift that terpene profile so fucking drastically with the smallest little amount of thiol. It just shifts this way and the whole profile is like, and now it's something completely different. And so I also would have said many times, oh, I love the terpinolene dominant terpene profiles. I say it like that because I don't know that it's just terpinolene. And I know that it can't just be terpinolene, but there's so many complex flavors and aromas and aromatics that are involved in this magic that's being produced by this plant that it's only our inability to perceive it that makes us have to talk in a more base language, like, oh yeah, terpinolene is.
I only know it is.
What my favorite was.
I only know it is that one because of the lab results, though, right? I wouldn't have been able to tell you that.
But it's not the only thing present. It's not
100%.
You're just assuming the smell of terpinolene is the smell of those terpinolene profiles, and that all that other stuff is not really.
That's not what I'm saying.
The terpinolene.
That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that is the dominant terpene in all of these profiles that I like. But all of the ones I just listed off, I mean, be it a Sprite-like flavor, a squirt-like flavor, an orange flavor, a lime flavor that is just doused in skunk, grapefruit, all these different flavors are very different flavors, right? They just all happen to be the fact that their terpene profile is always leading in terpinolene. Now, that's the reason I say it's my favorite terpene, because it's always the leader. Now, I could never imagine even smoking that terpene on its own or without other cannabinoids, especially CBG, which I found also through testing. They seem to go hand in hand, terpinolene and CBG. They're always CBG is never higher than THC, but it's always the leader in the other cannabinoids in the test results, right? And it's never
of your stuff, of the stuff you're growing, and that you're
all
seeing.
of the things I've tested, yes.
Right.
Which
so what
is
I'm saying is,
fraction of the entire.
A cannabinoid profile will not always smell like the dominant terpene.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
You can't assume that because something's dominant. Because something's dominant doesn't always mean that that's what you're tasting. You're tasting the profile, unless you're tasting it alone.
But you're tasting.
Otherwise, you're tasting a profile.
Dude, I agree. That's why I love clementine, because it tastes like oranges. That's why I love lime skunk, because it tastes like limes. Like super lemon haze, it's got the lemons, right? It's not because they all taste the same. It just so happens to be that terpene is the leader in the pack. That's why I asked if you had a certain. Let me rephrase it. Do you have one that tends to lend to your tastes?
Well, like I said, if it's been grown exceptionally, I'll appreciate it on a high level. I'll be grateful. I'll be like, this is wonderful. Whether it's a fruity or a gassy or a hazy or a, myrcene, terpene, whatever terpenes are present and volatile organics are present, if they were grown exceptionally, I'll fucking love them. And like I said, I like having all of them in my stash. So if I had, if I've got some guavas and some bananas and some, gases and some hazes, there's none of those that I'll hit like until it's all gone. I'll enjoy the differences. When I was younger, I might have been like, oh, I'm going to hit all of this until it's gone, and then I'll move on to the next flavor. But now I have a quiver, and I like to enjoy the different flavors. I just like them to be grown very well.
I do like that you said flavors and not effects, because that is, for me, priority number one. Effects is not too far behind it. And I'll tell you what, I got something way beyond my normal quiver lately. I was fortunate enough to process some triple burger for another caregiver friend of mine here in Michigan. panelist on the Michigan Bros Grow Show with me. His name is Baked Pone. He's a commercial grower, but also has a caregiver grow. He grew Triple Burger, which is a GMO brat cross times 3.
GMO.
And my goodness, if you could describe something more opposite than what I was with the hazy type varieties, that was it. Every time I hit that dab, I wanted to go to sleep for 12 hours. My eyes could not stay awake. I could barely open them. It was just like unlike any other effects that most of my strains give me. And that was cool to have.
So did it have a really like strong garlicky flavor?
Yes, but it wasn't the full blend of the garlic, mushroom, onion. It was very much just leaning into that garlic flavor.
So that's a thiol, 100%. That is not a terpene. It's actually a group of thiols that create that garlicky flavor. I've got a Trop Nana that for whatever reason is neither cookies, it's not orange, and it's not banana. It's total fucking garlic. And I'm hitting it right now.
We got a Trop B at Eden. That's a pretty fucking funk of a Trop B for sure. I've got a Trop C here in front of me that is probably
Too dark.
the closest thing to just taking an orange, an unpeeled orange, and just taking the biggest bite out of it that you can, because it gives you the rind, the sweet, the whole 9 yards. Yeah, exactly.
Hell yeah.
And
I ate it.
It is, but it would have been just like without peeling it, just eating the whole thing, because you're getting the whole 9 yards. And man, it is one of the, especially at the lower temperature, it is one of the most intense flavors. And I said it back at the beginning of this year. It was one of the best ones I hit in 2022. Man, it's close to it. The reason it surprises me so much is because it blows my mind that a cannabis plant can taste like an orange like this. Because
Totally.
I want anybody to show me an orange plant that tastes like a fucking cannabis plant, or give me an orange that tastes like a cannabis plant,
or a garlic plant, or a lemon plant, or a dude, just name it. This is the most mind-blowing part of this plant.
Fucking mind.
And that's why I love VOCs the most, because it's just a different flavor profile. It's just, you're gonna get one that smells like this microphone. You know what I mean? Like eventually.
I will say, going down that road again that we went down a while back, I just said this before on one of my posts, and everybody kind of commented on it. Like, I kind of thought they would. I don't like fresh press. I do not like, for the most part. I won't ever cross anything out. I like to speak in absolutes anymore. So I won't ever cross anything out. We just had an amazing chem the other day that pressed out. It was just beautiful fresh. But I generally don't like fresh press, and I think it's because of the more volatile monoterpenes and whatnot being present, or I just prefer them. And of course, I think, again, back to everything's personal preference. I just prefer them to mature a bit, And I also am not. Some fresh frozen is great, but man, the half dry, the quarter dry, just letting it ripen just a little bit after the harvest on the plant prior to washing not only increases your yields, but allows the terpene profile to mature a little bit more. And I'm just a big proponent of maturation.
It only increases your yields because you've lost the water weight, right? So you're not including
not necessarily, because it also makes a lot of the trichomes the stalks
more brittle.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because I don't do when I it's hard to say when I say I do my half dry, it's not a half dry, and it's really hard to equate at that point in time how much of a dry it is, because the only way that you can dry it or weigh it at the beginning is with on the stalk, because you're trying to dry it, and so it gets a little hairy in there as to trying to equate numbers and whatnot, even at a commercial level. But no, not only because of the weight, it's more than right. It's not only just the weight equation back and forth. It's also that it makes some of the stalks very brittle. The Critical Kush. We wash Critical Kush fresh frozen, and because of its absolutely just sticky heads, fresh frozen didn't. It yielded horrible, like 0.02%. I mean, just horrible, absolutely dog shit. We dried it in controlled controlled conditions for probably, I think it was 4 days when we finally bucked it and put it in the freezer, and the return was phenomenally higher. Like I think it ended up returning almost 6%, like 5.5%, and the terpene profile remained very, very similar to the terpene profile that we tested with flour, with the cured flour.
6% is really as high as it gets. That's 30% dry yield, you know, or 24 on the low end if it's a multiplication of 4 instead of 5.
If you're getting much more than that, you're
anything over
contaminants.
Oh, when I see people say 8 and 9, and I'm like, that's not.
You beat it up.
I don't think they know. I don't think they know the math. Is what it's like. If you're missing the math is very simple. You know, cannabis you'll lose like 70, 75 to
80% water weight.
80%, but that 5% is the difference between 4 or 5x, and depending on the structure of the bud and how it's holding moisture and whatnot. It's I always use the pragmatic number and go, with a bigger extraction.
Safer. Yeah, I mean,
I'm happy with 4, bro. I'm happy with a 20% dry yield. 20% dry yield is amazing. I've made bubble a handful of times and got a 30% yield, but that is that's not the normal.
Agreed.
Like
Agreed.
The anomaly.
So
you could build a whole company around that. Like you could build an entire company around that cultivar and just washing it, because 30% is holy fuck. That is substantial.
Yeah. I mean, people do that just to make edibles with it. You know what I mean? It's the highest return. Yeah, it's an ingredient at that point.
For the same amount of work, you're just producing this like this extra 33%.
Yeah, it's kind of a lot.
So Marcus, I know, and we've talked quite a bit on the show regarding the different consistencies that we can take hash down the different roads. And I know that you said that you have a love for anything that has quality, that you can taste the quality in. But of course, there's always a preference. So knowing that you're have a solventless preference, hash or rosin?
Oh, once again, I love them both. I would be like, sad to not have one of them in my stash. I've had hash and not had rosin, and thought, ooh, it would have been nice to have rosin all that time. I've had rosin and just gone for short periods of time without hash. They're very different. They are very, very, very different. Hash to me is just a deeper, fuller experience. It's something different. Rosin is just like an amazing dessert. It's so flavorful, and it's just like an overall nice feeling. It doesn't last as long for me. It doesn't sit as deep, but I love it. I love them both. Keep in mind, I never smoked the oils. So while everyone was enjoying all these different oils and the hashes and the cannabis, I was literally stuck in the hash lane with just hash. And so when rosin showed up, I was like pretty darn happy about that. I was like, holy shit, this is great. People just like, try my rosin. People would give me a lot of buds too. They still do. And I don't smoke bud, but I do like to taste what people have done. And so I'll take a little bud home, because people are always bashing on flower rosin. I'll admit I have a very special banger for my flower rosin. But it's nice to be able to taste someone's dabs in a bud. I can't take that shit home and like make a batch of hash, but I can easily just like press it and take a big dab off of it and smash it in the banger and be like, fuck, that was pretty flavorful.
Everybody heard it. Go back and clip it. But Bubble Man prefers flower rosin.
What's that?
I said go back, clip it. Everybody heard it. Bubble Man prefers flower rosin.
That's my favorite. I'm absolutely huge on flower rosin. I'll fight anyone. No. You know what? Number one would be a tie between full melt bubble hash grown and processed to perfection, and full melt dry sift grown
Okay.
Processed to perfection.
Like
That's
dried to
number
that
one.
dried to that
That
raisin status.
really, yeah, all just perfect. Right below that, like, would be like the best rosin. And I got to do the judging for the Masters of Rosin in Barcelona this year, which was 64 different
Jeez.
entries. And yeah, I think I have them up on my YouTube channel. There were 50 plus that were really fucking good. And of those 50 plus,
Jesus,
there must have been 30 that were like somewhat exceptional. Like exceptional. Like it was just like surprising.
It's
I was like,
really tough to start splitting hairs.
Well, it's like then you have to go into the ultra micro reaction that you have, and you have to pay attention to like does your heart beat a little faster when you look at this one? I'd open them and I'd pay attention to how I felt.
The visual.
If it looked a certain way, I'd be like, "Ooh, I like that." But it would be really in a split microsecond that you would feel that. You wouldn't hear those words. You'd just be like, "Oh, okay, that's nice."
Yeah.
And then you do the next one, which is to the nose. So the first opening it is one sort of mark, and then the nose is the next mark, and then the taste is the next mark. Effect, you're smoking 64 dabs. Like you can put the effect right out there. Right? I also don't give 1s, 2s, or 3s, and I don't give 8s, 9s, or 10s. I shrink the number down when I only have like 3 or 4 days to do that many flavors. But they gave me a half gram of 64 different varieties. It was 32 grams of varieties.
Oh no! How long did that take?
Dude, it took me 4 days, but I ended up.
Would have expected nothing less.
It was. I have the container over there. It's a small Pelican case, and they made these like wooden slats that the jars fit into, and there was like 16 or 20 whatever per slat, and I think there were 4 slats, and they fit right into this Pelican case, and it closed tight, and it was fucking heavy. And I'll never forget, I met up with, and we were going to the Masters of Rosin dinner. It was just the judges with David at this restaurant in Barcelona, and I get there early, and then damn it, Bobby shows up, who is the hash maker for Fletch at Archive Seeds, which those motherfuckers have fire. There's just like no denying that. Fire. Anyway, it's the truth. Like there's no, can't be denying that. Fletch is really the inspiration to a lot of good, cool things. You guys should get him on the show one day if you can. He's good to chat with. But damn it, Bobby shows up, and he rolls up, and he's all excited, and he gets out of the car, and we're kind of meeting for the first time. And I'm like, bro, like we're a little early. Like, why don't we walk up the stairs and sit on that little stoop over there, and we'll rip some dabs. And he's like, all right, cool. And so we go up there and we sit down, and we've got our 32 grams each, right, of Masters of Rosin hash. And I'm like, I'm pulling out my hash, and I'm pulling out I think I had a Carta. I had this Carta, my Legends of Hash Carta. And I'm pulling everything out, and I'm just about to load a dab, and he's like, oh, that's weird. He's like, what the fuck? He's like, dude, holy fuck. I think I left my hash in that car. Oh, so this was my experience of meeting Damn It Bobby. He was kind of like, he might not have been exactly like that, but he was definitely like tripping. He was like, holy fucking shit. So he's like, oh, okay, it was like an Uber. It was an Uber. And I'm like, okay, go on your phone, go into the Uber. You can see the driver. You can text the driver. It's the beauty of this shit. Yeah. Back in the day, if you got in some fucking random cab in Barcelona, if you know the number of it, as if you are ever going to get in touch with that person again. Now, even the cab app has the same thing. So it was either the cab app or Uber. He got in touch with the guy, and the guy brought his hash back. It was such a great...
That's crazy.
I wouldn't have told the story if he didn't get his hash back. I'll tell you that much. Tell you.
I've been taking too many Ubers, but I'm pretty sure I've lost at least a rosin or some type of pen in the back.
That's fine, but 32 grams.
Yeah, definitely not 32 grams.
I'm telling you, man, living over here, kind of out in the boonies. I live in the western slope of Colorado, and here in Montrose, and the Uber and all the taxis and everything, it just doesn't exist here. Like that's just not a thing. So man, when I go to a place like like fucking Vegas or when I go to Cali or something, it's like,
Oh,
oh my
that shit.
God, what the fuck is going on? What is apps? There's scan what? It's overload city for
It's
me.
a lot.
Big time.
That's why it's nice to be, in the low key, relax. I live in the boonies as well. I'm in a small village, seaside village on the Pacific Ocean on the way up to Whistler, BC. And we don't have, there's no order food that you can't take, order pizza or any
No, we
type
got
of food
one
here.
place that delivers us, I think.
Both
Yeah,
our
we don't
restaurants
have-
are about to close for the season until snow falls.
Oh shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's always been like that. I've lived out here for 28 years, and it's just always been like that. So I don't miss it or anything. There was, when I first moved here, there was a service, and I knew this service was going to go out of business because it was just too fucking baller. But it was called Pink Dot, and this was like in '96 when we moved here, and we lived on the water, and there was like 75 stairs to get down to our house, where the house that my wife and I lived on. It was so unbelievable, this house, through a forest with like giant
Groceries would
cedar
be
trees.
fun.
Dude, it was not fun. But listen to this: this company, Pink Dot, you could call them up and be like, "Yeah, we want some groceries," and they're like, "Okay, write the list down." My wife would like shoot the list down. He'd order. You could get them to. She'd give them a list to go to Whole Foods, another list to go to Safeway, and then a list to go to the pharmacy or whatever.
They still exist?
Apparently,
No, not here in Vancouver. That shit went out of business.
I think it's only in LA.
So
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But Pink
They
Dot
tried
in
to expand
Vancouver
it.
in the '90s. It was
So
so
they'll go
good.
everywhere and get out your whole shit, everything, your toothpaste.
And then walk them all the way down our stairs, and then get this. This is how ridiculous it was. Then put them in your fridge.
Whoa,
What?
Dude,
What?
I'm not even joking. I'm not even
I think they
joking.
just, I think they just crossed the boundary.
Dude, it
I'll
was
put a
so
cooler
good.
They
outside.
just
Thank
crossed the
you.
boundary.
Dude, it was so good. Like,
Oh, that's
do it
wild.
all. Just do it all. Because imagine, we lived in a place where you couldn't do anything
Yeah.
except that was available. And that whole service was built
That's
around
crazy.
like alcoholics and tobacco addicts. Like that's the service was built for those people,
told you to-
unfortunately.
Told you to
We
put
don't
my
want you
damn
driving,
ketchup
so
in the
we'll
left
bring it
door.
to you.
Holy shit. I was just like, they're like, most people just order smokes or booze and lottery tickets. I'm like, oh, you're really like serving to the highest caliber of humanity.
Right. Jeepers.
But they also do grocery shopping. So we put them out of business.
Oh, that's funny.
Apparently they still do here and there, whatnot. Just gotta go to those higher populated areas, and
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
travel becomes a problem.
I think most of us have moved out of the major metropolitan areas. It's just it's not really conducive to growing or processing cannabis for the most part, I think. It's nice to have land, be able to do some outdoor stuff, without nosy neighbors or I mean, I know you can do it everywhere. And like I said, I will advocate until the day I die for everybody to be able to do this in their backyard or with a greenhouse without it being broken into, you know what I mean? And just worrisome like that. Whether by someone down the street or the government, it'd be nice if just everyone could do this like it was tomatoes. But we're not there yet, and unfortunately, I think we got a long way to go. It seems like a slow process. What about, Bubble Man, you've seen this process go on for a long time, man. I've only really been paying attention for the last 15 years or so. You're over twice that amount in terms of being involved in this industry. Does it feel slow to you still, or does it feel like it's been a fast process? Because sometimes I think, well, maybe I got in while it was like, as things were changing, and it's kind of like, it was kind of already moving in that direction.
And already hit its peak.
Yeah.
I think as humans, we are very slow to like change and actually innovate. We do a lot of copying and we do a lot of like passing things back and forth, but the innovation is like, it's like this tiny, like just look back at like even basketball. There's a documentary or a TV show they created called The Winning Time on the rise of the LA Lakers. And it's like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Magic Johnson. And it's so well done, but you can see it's like, you're looking at it going, damn, we've come a long way. Like just the shoes they were wearing, the whole 9 yards. Like
yeah.
it is what it is.
It is true. It's a really overall, it's a slow process. It doesn't seem like it's going lightning fast or anything. I mean, day to day reading like these regulations that continuously come out, and it just seems like one state after another state in the United States here is just coming on board, whether it be medical or recreational, and it's just like, can we just accept it already?
Well, the crazy thing is, and it's just because cannabis is in such a unique situation and it's so different, but this happened with like everything, like every food that you've ever consumed that wasn't picked off a tree, but that came from a processing plant, all sorts of like the coffee you drink, like tons of stuff goes through this process where there's massive regulations and you get like for food, there's metal detectors that everything has to go through before it leaves the facility. It doesn't matter what it is. They can't take the chance that a bit of metal got into anything and is going to like hurt someone or chip their tooth. So this is just one of the regulations that's involved in food production. So it's like that with everything, but we're just living through the time where they're creating the regulations for cannabis, and she's super unique. She's not like just any normal thing. She's like this whole other thing that's never been done, that's now, actually pretty special. And I'm sure they're already worried that they opened Pandora's box and it'll never close again. And now it's just a matter of, I'll tell you this much. I work in a lab. I've trained a lot of people in the lab. And if I wasn't all over them and really like strict with SOPs and cleanliness,
Oh my God.
like you wouldn't believe it, man. Like people
Fucking
just
corners they want to cut.
well, they'll go into the bathroom with their scrubs on. So it's like, okay, well, that's like the only place in the whole building that has E. coli. But, all right.
Like your phone.
You didn't really have to do that. I don't think. Yeah, well, that's the other thing. Like people like are not looking at their phones while they're. So we don't let people into the facility with their phones. Ideally, we make sure the SOPs are followed, because I don't want hair in the rosin. I don't know if you guys know this about rosin, but when you press it in parchment, it becomes statically charged. And so if you like hang a piece of rosin and then you put your finger here, it'll like move to your finger. It's like statically charged. So you also have to think this is like a fucking tractor beam on the laboratory table sitting on silicone. If you don't have it covered, it's literally using a charge to pull things into it. So personally, what I do is I roll up 50-gram balls and I smash them on an old D-nail 15 by 15 t-shirt press, the original rosin press that D-nail released after the Rosin Tech video. So I would just smash that into a record-sized disc.
Nice.
And then I put it on top of a light box. And I'll have a little pair of tweezers, very sharp tweezers, and I'll open up the parchment quickly, make sure the room's super uber clean. And if I see any little thing, and it can be an eyebrow, it can be anything, I don't want anyone to have that experience. So I make sure that even though I'm producing on a large scale, I figure out SOPs to make sure that things can be extremely clean. And I like making hash in a lab on a commercial scale for many, tens of hundreds of kilos. You want to make sure that it's like the highest bar is set for the final person who's going to open up just a gram.
Yeah,
just
for every single person that gets that jar in their hands. I think every single one of us on this panel, had we been the main character in Breaking Bad, we would have done the same thing and spent an entire episode trying to get that fly out of our lab before we ran a single machine, because I'm not allowing a fly to get in my processing material. It's just not going to happen.
Yep. Truth.
Bubble Man, we appreciate you so much for joining us tonight on the Variables podcast. This has been so much fun, man. It's the first time I've gone live with you. I've been a fan of yours for over a decade. You've taught me so much. It's really a blessing to have you. Please, once again, share with us just real quickly what you're up to, where everyone can find you, and then we'll go around the horn and everybody can share where they're at.
Well, lately I'm doing a lot of consulting for building out hash labs and helping point people in the right direction for equipment. So anyone that wants to reach me for that can hit me up at bcbubbleman@icloud.com. I am on Instagram. I don't post a ton of stuff on there. I try to put the odd thing up there. That's BC Bubbleman as well. I do have a lot of people that hit me up in the private messages, so you can hit me up there, but be patient. It can take a couple of days to get back to people sometimes. And yeah, that's about it. Otherwise, just working at the lab, making hash, decarboxylating resin, making vape cart pens, and just having an overall good time. Maybe going to go to Prague next month for the CannaFest. So if you're out in CannaFest, look for me and my crew, the OG Crush and the Hogan from Thompson Duke and Vlad. We'll all be out there cruising around and looking forward to meeting people. So thank you guys so much for having me. Good to meet you, Superior Buds, and
Yeah, cheers.
Fregrowli, and
Great.
Pedro. Always a super pleasure.
Good
Fucking
time hanging out with you always,
love
man.
the vibes. Yeah,
Yeah,
love
it
the
was a lot of
vibes,
fun.
man.
Absolutely.
Pedro, where are you at?
You can find me at mr.rosins.neighborhood on Instagram, Pedro's Grow Room here on YouTube, the Heady Vault for the glass, and I do the consulting and whatnot myself. But fuck, man, go to Bubble Man.
If you're up north of the border, anyway, right? And I know he's doing operations all over the world. But Superior Buds, what about you?
You can see the garden and the hash lab 24/7 YouTube at superior.live. We're also Superior Buds 420 on all the socials.
And I'm Fregrowli, Fregrowli.com, YouTube, Twitch, Instagram, X, all those places. Check it out, FREGROWLI, and I'll be at the Michigan Gems and Genetics event here in Michigan, just north of Grand Rapids next weekend. Cheers, everybody. We're going to be live every Friday at 11 p.m. Eastern Time. Join us on all these beautiful platforms. Once again, thank you, Bubble Man, our guest tonight. And next week, we'll have Landry inside. Going to be talking cannabis mechanical. Reheat? What's that?
Reheat?
Cheers,
Be
guys.
good, everybody.
Cheers, everybody. Have a great night.
Peace out.